welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today we have a very special guest, and her name is Zoe Smith. We've had her on a couple of times, and today we're going to talk about star children and some other things, see what rabbit holes we come across, and, well, we're just going to have a fun old time. So, Zoe, how have you been since our last conversation?
I've been good, thanks. Really busy. I don't know where the time's going this year. We're like
Yeah.
halfway through May already, but yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, this year is going by pretty quick. Parts of it seem like they're going by a little slow, but then I look back at it and it's like, oh wow, all that time's already passed.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
frightening.
yeah, so on our last episode, we had left off with what would we tell our younger selves and stuff like that. And right before we hit record, you said that you were kind of thinking about that. So, what would you tell yourself if you could to kind of help yourself now, you know?
I think one of the biggest things that would have made a real difference to my life a lot sooner would have been if I had really understood that other people's expectations are not mine and I don't have to take them on board. So
Mm,
if I would have if I would have known that sooner, it would have taken a lot of pressure off me that I'd put on myself to live up to other people's expectations and then trying to please other people for what they were wanting for me or what they were expecting of me. And
mhm.
in the end, when you do that, you really only make yourself miserable unless it coincides that what you want, what you genuinely want, is what other people are also expecting of you, which I think must be quite rare.
Yeah.
And I think that can come from parents, family, society, teachers in school, a whole host of friends, a whole host of different places. But once you realise that actually it isn't about what other people think, because in trying to please them, you end up making yourself miserable and you can never please everyone all of the time. So even if what you do makes someone happy for a little while, you'll do something else that then doesn't make them happy. So you ultimately can never make everyone happy. So really the only person who you need to make happy is yourself, and then your success will follow that.
Yeah, and that's some pretty powerful stuff right there. And I have to agree that that is something that I would have liked to have learned of way, way earlier on because having those expectations placed on myself is one of those that I want to please people, and it just doesn't work that way. Like you said, I can maybe get someone a little happy for a little while, and then I can do something and just shift it the exact opposite way. And what makes one person happy may make someone else not happy, and then it's like, well, then to make that person happy, then it makes that other person not happy, and it's a whole mess of things. But
Yeah.
it is one of those that I placed so much stock in it that I, like you said, just brought myself down because I wasn't living up to everyone else's expectations. But now that I'm working on myself more, it is totally different. And like you said, the success kind of follows, but it's still sometimes a little weird being like, oh yeah, it's okay to be me, you know?
Yeah, and being able to explore who me is, and there's so many emotions that go with trying to please other people and then failing, because ultimately we do fail because we can't always please everyone, as we've said. So then you have the feelings of guilt or shame or anger or disappointment, and you internalize that within yourself because you've put so much pressure on pleasing other people and meeting their expectations that then you
Mhm.
feel like a failure. And so it kind of undermines your own self confidence, self esteem, self worth. And so then when you remove all that and you have the opportunity to figure out who me is, that's vast, isn't it? Because suddenly there's no expectations placed on you and you're figuring
Mhm.
out for yourself what really makes you happy, what brings you joy, what do you enjoy doing, where are your gifts, where are your skills, where's your interest, and where do you want to grow your knowledge. And it's so huge.
Mhm. And being able to figure out me is one of those things that if you don't start at a young age, then it feels like you're just playing a huge game of catch up. Everyone else is ahead of me and everyone else has their stuff together and I'm sitting here still figuring stuff out. And so we labels and stuff that go along with different diagnoses and things like that nowadays that help people figure out like, oh, I have a little quirk, so maybe I belong to this category or something like that. But along that line, we have the new age generations, if you will, coming along. And so that's like star children, indigo children, stuff like that. And that could actually help some people be like, oh, maybe I fit more along these lines of models of how a person should be or whatnot. And it kind of gives them room and permission to just be, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. And I think, whereas if you've come to the journey of finding yourself a little bit later in life, although that's quite daunting, you've already got a mass of information about who you are not. So you're
oh,
not necessarily going from a standing start. You've got loads of stuff about who you're not, what doesn't bring you joy, what hasn't worked, those kind of things, and snippets of what have, and then it's sort of piecing that together. But I think you're right. If you start to understand some concepts and traits of different generations and the new sort of newer generations on Earth as it is, that can really help. I know that helped me. I remember reading a book quite a while ago, quite a few years ago, about indigo children, and then that led to crystal children and more recently rainbow children. And just reading through, I started to think, hang on a minute, that kind of describes me.
mm-hmm,
I fit there, and it did help me to start to look at myself differently and some of my traits, and to see some of my skills and qualities in a different way. So when I was reading about star children, I I think I kind of fit a little bit with indigo, but more so with crystal. And
mm-hmm,
crystal, the indigo children are the ones who came to Earth. Probably we started to hear about indigo children in the 70s and 80s, 1970s, 1980s. So not really that long ago.
mm-hmm.
Um, but obviously, there are still indigos coming through now, maybe in lesser amounts or maybe greater amounts at the moment, actually. And the indigos are like the trailblazers, the ones who change things, shake things up, question everything, look at new ways of doing things, and get all of that in motion. So in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways, they can create a bit of unrest around them for people who like the way things are and don't really want to change. It
Mm-hmm.
can cause a bit of chaos and upheaval sometimes.
Yeah.
And then the crystal children are more around calming that back down, bringing healing to the earth, being the mediators,
Mm-hmm.
um, helping get that change in place, but in a sort of calmer way, and taking
Mm-hmm.
it forwards. And there's a lot of healing qualities around them. And then
Yeah.
rainbow children are the sort of last of the star children that we know about at present. That isn't to say there won't be different star children in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But the rainbow children really fit that category of having a label, because adults generally don't know what to do with them if they're not in tune with their own sort of
Mm-hmm.
spiritual side. So
Mm-hmm.
the rainbow children can be super clever. They can appear as if they're like wise beyond their years. They're really good at synthesizing and pulling chaos together and just creating calm. They're really
Mm-hmm.
good at matching people's frequencies and energies in different situations and then calming it down. Very
Huh.
in tune with their intuition, and just when you look at them, you know there's something about them that
Mm-hmm.
just. But I guess for those children, sometimes life can feel really overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
and matching different people's energies must feel a bit like a roller coaster at times.
Oh yeah.
So I think they struggle sometimes to sort of even that out and come back to
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And I think that's sometimes when we see behavioural issues,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know how to express it, and parents can't always recognise what's going on and support them with it. And so it
Mm-hmm.
comes across as mental health or behavioural or
Yeah.
a label.
Yeah, and those labels, whenever they're used properly, they can definitely help us really figure out, like, oh, this is things that I can do or shouldn't do to help create the best lifestyle, if you will. And so it's really good to have them, but whenever they're mislabeled, then it creates that weird little prison box that is just like, why am I in here whenever everyone else is outside of it, you know? I do have a small list of some of the children that you were talking about, and then there's a couple of others that I hadn't really not talked about, hadn't heard about before. And so let's see, we've got indigo children, of course, crystal children, rainbow children, diamond children, then golden children or children of the sun, and then platinum children.
I haven't heard of those either.
Yeah, and so I've got a little list with all the characteristics and stuff. Not all of them. It's a really basic kind of just looking at it, but then there's other star seed types. So there's Pleiadian, Sirian, Arcturian, Orion, Andromedian, Lyrian, and so that's really interesting starseed types. So with that being said, you said you felt like you maybe belonged in one of those categories yourself?
Yeah, I feel like I fit into the crystal category
Mm.
because although I do have a fiery streak, which channeled in the right direction can often be used to change things up, which is why I sort of looked at indigo children and I thought, oh yeah, that kind of fits me in a way. But then I looked at crystal children and I thought, because it is often, I can be really quite diplomatic. And with the healing work that I do, then obviously the healing qualities come across strongly. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really figure that I fit more in crystal than indigo.
Mm.
Um, but I do find it really interesting. And some of those other star groups she talks about, like the Orion and um, that I think they overlap. So I think you can be from one of those groups and be a crystal or a rainbow
Mm-hmm.
or indigo. I
Yeah.
think they kind of overlap. But I'm really intrigued now because I haven't heard of the golden children and the diamond children and those groups. So I'm
Yeah.
really intrigued by those.
Let's go through this quick little list, some of the characteristics and stuff, see if they kind of align with your knowledge, because the thing with star children or whatever children is that we don't really have a way to sit there and necessarily say this is scientifically based or anything like that. It's a lot like your horoscope. And so it's essentially saying, like, these are the things that make sense for this person, in a sense. And so different sources of information can have different sources of, well, not different sources of information can have different sources of information, but different sources of information can have varying information within that context. So my list may differ a little bit from yours, and we may see something that may be going along the lines of what you were talking about, like the star seeds overlapping and stuff. But real quick, before we get on that, can I just step away for like a half second? Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. So sorry about that.
sorry.
So, with that in mind, the first one is the Indigo Children, correct? They are
Yeah.
like the progenitor of this whole thing. So, origins. The term was coined by a parapsychologist and self-described Cynthia, I don't know how to pronounce that word apparently, Nancy Ann Tapp in the 1970s. And so the birth years are allegedly from the 1970s onwards, and some sources suggest earlier arrivals, but they are warriors, system busters, strong willed and independent, intuitive and creative, high energy and impatient, sense of royalty, deserving to be here, empathetic and sensitive, and often associated with diagnoses like ADHD, and proponents suggesting that they are often misunderstood instead of being indigo children. Then we have the crystal children. Real quick, did that sound kind of right with the
Yeah.
indigo?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Okay. So, crystal children, where you feel that you kind of belong a little bit more. Origins concept was popularized by authors Doreen Virtue. Following the Indigos, they're seen as a generation arriving after the Indigos have started to break down old structures. So, Alleged birth years, roughly from the 1990s to the early 2000s. Some say as early as 1980s or as late as 2010. Um, Alleged traits and mission, peaceful and loving, highly sensitive and empathetic, telepathic, large penetrating eyes, forgiving and easygoing, deep connection to nature and animals, may have a high vibrational energy, sometimes associated with a crystal or opalescent aura. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think it does, yeah.
Um, and let's see, that telepathic one would be pretty handy in some cases, right?
Yeah. Wouldn't it? I always
And
think with
then,
telepathy, you don't realize you've had a telepathic moment until after. It would be
oh
really
yeah,
nice to know you were having it at the time, wouldn't it?
yeah. And it would be one of those things where it's like, well, I'm not crazy. That's nice to know.
Yeah.
So then we got Rainbow Children. So there's in my list, there's an important distinction. So okay, Rainbow Children, yes, very important. I did not know this, so I'm glad that I read this before I read it out loud. A rainbow baby is not the same as a rainbow child. So, yeah, I did not know that that was a term. So, not the same thing. So, origins popularized by Doreen Virtue as well as and others, and seen as the generation arriving after the Crystal Children. Alleged birth years around the early 2000s, and some believe they're born to Crystal Children. Interesting. So, alleged traits and mission: high spiritual evolution, embodiment of divine love and harmony, fearless love, and strong-willed, highly energetic and creative, instantly manifest needs, loving and giving, and may recover quickly from negative emotions. That would be handy. Um, does that sound about right from your knowledge?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're on a good start. So, Diamond Children. Alleged birth years, generally described as arriving from around 2012 and onward. Alleged traits and mission: clarity and invincibility, high vibrational energy, sweet, active, and expressive. Their mission is often tied to anchoring higher light and consciousness on the planet, helping humanity to see their own inner light and potential. And there's not a lot more information on that, but let's see. So these are the two that neither of us really heard about yet. So, Children of the Sun or Golden Children, alleged traits and mission, described as highly advanced and intelligent souls with very clear missions, often remembered from a young age. They are said to have little to no personal karma and possess significant intuitive gifts, often embody qualities of tenderness, innocence, and profound wisdom, may find traditional schooling challenging due to their unique intelligence and desire for resonant learning, and their purpose is often seen as bringing light, warmth, and a renewed sense of sacredness and gentle strength to the world. Interesting. And then Platinum Children. Alleged traits and mission. One source describes Platinum Children, or Platinum Indigos, as a subcategory for Indigo Children, appearing in from 1964 onwards, characterized by extreme hypersensitivity to foods, environments, and emotional intensity, and a low tolerance for stress. May experience learning or comprehension and or expression disorders. The role is often linked to highlighting areas needing profound healing and adjustment in societal structures and environmental awareness. And it's worth noting the term platinum birthday has a more common, unrelated meaning, which is turning the age that matches the last two digits of your birth year, or sometimes related to the number 70. Interesting. Those last two definitely sound like they're working their way into the collective consciousness, if you will.
And it
So,
sounds like the sun, Children of the Sun, the golden one,
hmm
um, sounds like they've got the biggest problem with mainstream education as it is, which would
hmm
reflect what I've experienced in education over the last few years, and that is that more and more children are struggling with our traditional education system. Um,
yeah.
so that's
You
quite
were
interesting.
Yeah, you do have a history with teaching and stuff like that. So you definitely have this firsthand experience of saying they don't fit that box, but they definitely fit another box, but let's not force them into that box, right? So what are some of the things that you could think of to help parents maybe understand their children a little bit better instead of instantly labeling them with something that's more mainstream?
I think where I've seen real success with children who sort of fit this description, and they struggle in mainstream school, but the ones who thrive are the ones whose parents are quite open to letting them explore, to whatever their interest is, to learn about it, to go with it. And quite often they've got a gift in a certain way. So I know quite a few children that this would apply to. And so, for example, one of them is amazing at playing golf from a very young age, and will probably go on to be a really successful professional golfer, and then who knows, maybe teach others or whatever. But that is her focus, and sitting down to learn maths and English is something that she would really struggle with. She can do it and especially if the material is taught to her in a way that responds to how she learns, but golf's her main focus. I've got another example of a boy who is an amazing musician. He can hear music and go and play it on any instrument. He might sit and think, oh, I can't play the guitar, I'm going to go teach myself, and he does. And then he'll be up within a few months playing it on stage in the school concert, taught himself the drums, and he's only 12 and he can play so many different instruments. Another one who loves his horses, and so finding what the interest is of the child and then allowing them to express themselves through it is one of the key factors, I think, which unfortunately isn't always available to all children. And when they are not able to find their love, that is when they have no outlet. So they really, really, really struggle. And then not only that, but they have to go to school and learn what every other child learns, and they struggle with that. So the frustration that they must feel will just build and build and build, and I think that's when we see the explosive, challenging behaviour that then gets labelled in a box. Whereas if they've got a way of letting out that frustration, then they're more able to deal with the stuff that they struggle to deal with because they've got an outlet. And even better, if we can tailor their education around their interest or the way that they learn. When I taught in China, we taught the International Baccalaureate programme, and I taught on the primary years programme. And I taught grade 5, and grade 5 is the last grade before they move on to middle school. And so they were able, at the end of grade 5, for the last sort of 3 months or so of school, they worked in groups, developed their own projects from start to finish, and then presented them on stage. And so the work that we saw those kids do was just phenomenal. It blew me away. It was nothing like I'd ever seen amongst the same age group in the UK. And that wasn't because I was in a different country and it was a different way of learning, a different culture kind of thing. These children were from all over the world, and it was the curriculum that was designed to allow them to be free in their learning and to go and explore what interested them and present it back to others. And then they all learnt from each other, and who better to learn from than somebody who's passionate about their subject, their interest. And they did so well. So we had a real range from a group who wanted to help out at the local animal shelter and raise money for the animal shelter and to understand what that animal shelter did and how they could look after animals better and save them off the streets. And there was another one that was looking at pollution in different ways. There was another one looking at crime, and there was just so many different topics, and they all put their heart and soul into it. And so that's just one example of how we can actually change the curriculum. Instead of sitting them all down to teach them about Vikings, which actually out of class of 30, there might be 2 that are particularly interested in Vikings and the rest of them couldn't care less. And what difference is it going to make to their lives? It's not something crucial to know, but in England we do sit them down and teach them about Vikings, and it's not relevant. So if we make the learning relevant, and we do it in such a way where they can explore and be creative, And let's
Hmm.
face it, we've got technology at our fingertips. My class in China used to bring their own devices, and
Hmm.
they were able to use them for their research, and they were showing me apps I'd never seen and teaching me how to use different apps. And
Uh,
so embracing the technology within it as well, if it's appropriate, can really
hmm.
help. There's so
Yeah.
many opportunities.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. And that's really cool that you were able to experience that kind of project building with some young, bright minds, because that's always really cool to really experience watching the creative young process take place, because it's like, oh, they're kids and they're doing that. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I was also a kid and I could have done that. But it's really awesome that you're able to sit there and see this whole difference of expression in a sense, because it sounds like that is really the difference between the mainstream education system and what you're talking about is just expression. It's just, what are you wanting to do and why not expand on it? And it's really, really cool. And there was one of the star groups that it talked about resonant learning, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Was it the
uh,
golden,
It was
or was it rainbow?
it was the Golden Children. Yep. May find traditional schooling challenging due to their unique intelligence and desire for resonant learning. So yeah, definitely finding something that just resonates with
Yeah.
someone. So,
Because then when they've got a topic or an interest and it resonates, you can weave in some of the other skills that they need to learn into that
mm,
topic. And one of the groups that I worked with was interested in learning how to get a rocket to fly. So they built a
mm,
model rocket and
uh,
then tried to fly it. We were getting maths in there, we were getting physics, so they were looking not only at the angles and the shape of the rocket that was best, but also the fuel. And so,
mm,
there's so many ways that we can integrate maths and English and other skills into project work,
mm.
but yet it's relevant to them and they're interested in it.
Yeah. And whenever you were talking about the student that loved golf, that was where my mind was going to, is just like, if they're having trouble with math, just be like, hey, so you hit the ball this hard, it goes this direction at this angle. And that would be like, oh, hey, that gives me a hook to be like, maybe I need to learn some math now.
Yeah, and then and see the actual relevance of it
Hmm.
in the
Yeah,
sport.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, some people may just say, "Hey, I don't need to know all about Vikings because they're not a active threat now," But and I remember having that kind of conversation in school whenever I was in middle school, high school. It was always like, "Why are we learning this if we're never going to use it?" And it it is funny because there are definitely some aspects and some lessons and things from different categories of classes that can be applied to everyday things, or maybe not everyday things, but things that happen occasionally. It's like, oh yeah, I'm glad I learned that or somewhat retain it. But at the same time, it's not every day that it's like I needed to remember all this trigonometry for some reason.
Mm.
But there's definitely one time in the year where it's like, hey, I wish I learned taxes. Like, you're in the UK, you don't actually have to do taxes like we do.
We do it
Isn't that right?
different. Yeah. If we're employed, it's all done for us. And if we're self-employed, then we have to sit down once a year and scratch our head remembering how to do it. Yeah.
Oh man, so
Even just like budgeting, when you move out and get your first place,
mhm,
sitting down and figuring out how to work a budget, if you've never done it before, that can be challenging. Why aren't we teaching them
mhm,
how to do that? And working out percentages so that if they get a discount on something, they actually know what 10% of whatever it is, because a lot of kids really struggle with that.
mhm,
But yeah, actually being able to do practical stuff that we do use,
mhm.
um, yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, and I know that it's one of those things that we don't know what's going to be important necessarily all the time. but we have a good idea. And I think that because we do need to know how to, say, change a tire on a car, not everyone drives a car, so not everyone needs to know how to change a tire. But a lot of people will force that kind of perspective on everyone else. Like, oh, you don't know how to change a tire. Why don't you know how to change a tire? You should know how to change a tire. And it's like, well, because I've never owned a car, so I don't need to know how to change a tire. And so the same concept gets played to children that just learn different. Or just have different interests, you know? It's like, well, it's because that's their interests, so leave them alone, you know? Or it's, I don't need to learn that because I'm not going into law school or something like that. But whenever it's children and they're learning to grow up, what are some of the things that you would say to the parents of saying like, hey, let them explore, they'll find themselves, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We always find ourselves, even if we come the long way round. And I think if I could talk to myself when I was younger, and I really think this is still relevant today, and it's what a lot of parents maybe don't always step back and think about. But
Mhm.
if we use the analogy of life being a journey, it really is a journey. And there isn't just one destination. There's lots and lots of different possible destinations. And does it matter if you don't go from A to B? Does it matter if you end up at N or L or P? No, you can go whichever way to on your life journey that you like, and nothing's ever wasted. We have good
Mhm.
experiences, we have bad experiences. The good ones tell us what we're good at, what we want more of, and we follow those. And the bad ones tell us, oh, that didn't work so well, I'm going to avoid that next time. And sometimes you have to have those bad experiences several times to really reinforce that message. But eventually, and I think it's being brave to explore, to try things. And if they don't work, fine, try something else. But never see it as a waste because it's always beneficial. And just embrace that exploration and that journey and go with
Mhm.
the flow. I think that would have been really useful for me to know when I was a kid. Um,
Mhm.
and then I think I would have been really open to, well, I think I've been pretty open to a lot of opportunities anyway, but I think I would have started with that a bit younger. Um,
Mhm.
and it would have been much more exciting.
Yeah, and I do have to agree that I wish I kind of knew all that stuff a little bit younger myself. And it seems that it's a lesson that's like right on the verge of like really understanding and grasping it, but it's not quite there. It's like, hey, I can see it, but I'm not taking it for some reason. And I think it's just because I grew up with that whole aspect of having to be in someone else's box of a sorts. And it does kind of boil down to, like, let's say geographical location, for example. A lot of people will stay close to their families because it's familiar, it's comfortable, it's safe. And so, why exchange that for a life of adventure where there's no telling what's going to happen? But, like you said, even if I have to take the long way, I'll find myself. And sometimes it comes from moving. Sometimes it comes from doing those weird things that you never thought you would go and do. But you can't do that if you don't give yourself that permission to. And even more so if your parents don't give you permission to. And I think that that's one of those things is that a parent is always the parent and the kid is always the kid. And I don't know if I'll ever be a father, so I don't know how to do the whole here's a box like to grow up in. Let me take the box away from you now. So what would you say to parents in that regard that it's okay to finally let your kid be not a kid? You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're saying. My upbringing was quite similar. My parents were quite strict and had their very own set idea about what was acceptable or what the future should look like, and it's hard to step outside that box. But I mean, I'm not a parent, but I do know that if I was, I would really want to give my children the freedom right from being tiny to explore who they were. And I wouldn't ever want to put restrictions on them, like expectations. So if they chose that they wanted to go to university, for example, great,
Hmm.
I'll support them in that. And if they didn't
Yeah.
want to go, I would support them in whatever they chose instead.
Hmm.
If they wanted to move away, I wouldn't stop them. Of course, you'd miss them, but we've got so much technology to keep in touch nowadays, and
Hmm.
I'd encourage them to travel. And it's through traveling that you really find yourself, because if you've moved away from your family area, you have to go out and make new friends. I had a client at work last week who'd moved into the area. And
Hmm.
so I was asking him about lifestyle, and he was saying that he used to love playing golf, but he hasn't played golf for a long
Hmm.
time. So I said, "Oh, why haven't you played golf?" Oh, well, he said, "I moved here in about 6 years ago, about 2018. I moved here in 2018, and I don't know anyone." I said, "That was
Hmm.
6 years ago." So he said, "Yeah, coming up, yeah, yeah." I said, "Well, how come you don't know anyone now?" He said, "Oh, well,
Hmm.
I don't know anyone." I said, sometimes I can be quite blunt and direct. And I said to him, "Well, you never will if you don't go out there and make some friends." I said, "No one's going to
Hmm.
come looking for you. You have to
Hmm.
go out there and make some friends." I said, "There's two lovely golf clubs really locally. Go and play. Take your clubs. Just go."
Uh-huh.
Um, so he'd obviously wanted to move to the area, and
Hmm.
that's where it had stopped. And so he pushed out of his comfort zone to get him here, but then he hadn't actually done anything about that in terms of building a life here. And so his life, I think, is pretty lonely and quite restricted at the moment.
Hmm.
So I think it's about encouraging your children to embrace all opportunities, to be flexible,
Hmm.
to be open, to really experiment and explore, and just get stuck into life, because you see so many kids that get stuck into a screen. They get plonked in front of a screen from a young age,
Hmm.
and then their social skills don't develop. And I hear in my work a lot about social anxiety, and I've heard
Hmm.
a lot of young people say, "I have social anxiety, full stop." As if I've got social anxiety, so I can't go out, I can't make friends, I can't do this, I can't do that, and I'm always going to have it because I've got it. And just want to shake them and say,
Uh,
it's not a life sentence. You can
no.
change that. And
Hmm.
it's like, so certain labels nowadays give people permission to live in a certain way, but actually,
Hmm.
labels can be peeled off. They don't have to last forever. And it can be painful to do that, like pulling off a band-aid, but we can do it. And you've got to push
Hmm.
out of that comfort zone to really experience what's on the other side of it.
Hmm. Oh, I love that. You're right, though. If we don't pull off that band-aid, if we don't actually let whatever wound it is actually get some air, some fresh air and stuff, it'll just make it worse. And it won't actually get better. And as someone that has generalized anxiety and stuff like that, I can tell you that yes, it will go away, but only if I work on it. It does not sit there and just like, oh, hey, I woke up today. I feel like going to the mall and talking to every single person. It doesn't work like that. It goes
No.
more like, I feel like going to the mall to like maybe go to a store, maybe talk to someone, and that's it. And then the next time, maybe two stores, But it's one of those things that if I don't put myself out there, then I won't know what I'm actually capable of. And it's one of those other things that if I'm too afraid to do it, then I'm not going to do it. And if I'm too afraid to do it, I maybe just need a little bit of a push or some support, some encouragement, or some people nowadays knows, well, I just thought of the word and it just left me as soon as I wanted to say it. Body double, not body double. Is it body double? Where like say I need to get something done around the house and it just having someone's presence around is like, oh hey, that makes me able to do that thing.
Yeah.
I
Like,
forget
it's
what
like
it's
an
called. Like,
indirect accountability, isn't it? Because there's someone
yeah,
else there, so you'll do it.
well, for me it's not like an accountability thing. For me it's like, hey, just having someone else's presence around enables me to give myself permission to do it without getting super distracted or something.
Right.
Like, I don't know. For me, it's like a form of focus because I can talk to them. So, for instance, if I needed to clean the apartment, I could talk to someone and they could just stand there in the middle of the apartment while I'm cleaning around them, and that's fine. But I can sit there and be like, hey, I need to clean the apartment and no one's here. And it's like, well, it's just okay. But again, it's not the accountability because it's not like, hey, I need to do this because I was told to do it. It's like I get permission to move. I don't know. It's the weirdest thing. And there's a term for it and I had it and it's just not in my repertoire right now. Darn it. So, whenever we're actually able to push through and start a new experience, it can be really, really scary, but one of the things that I learned a little bit too late in life is that excitement and fear can feel the exact same.
Yes. Yeah, they can. Do you ever get
Hmm.
that nervous feeling of like butterflies? Um,
Hmm.
and you're right, yeah, you can get that on in a good way and in a I'm not really sure about this kind of a
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost akin to being on a roller coaster, but I don't know. The roller coasters are a real coin toss for me. Either I'm going to really enjoy it, like through getting on and getting off, or I'm going to enjoy it after it starts the first descent. Like because the climb up is the worst part. It's
Yeah. The
that
anticipation.
anxiety. It's like, oh, I didn't want to do this. Why did I do this? But as soon as that first drop happens, it's okay. And that kind of goes in line with like for me, roller coasters were a no go for the longest time because I wasn't in control of the situation. But that could be a whole totally other subject. Well, actually, we've got a little bit of time. Why don't we talk about that or something along those lines? Because being an indigo child, star child, any one of those variations, we're sitting getting brought into this world, and people are trying to control you in a sense, right? But you're not really wanting to be controlled, but you're kind of on a ride, so you don't really have a whole lot of option except to just kind of let
I'll
go.
let go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of those situations come with practice, don't they? You know, like if you're learning a sport or a particular skill, learning to drive, it comes through repetition. The more you do it, the better you get. The more you do it and the better you get, the more your confidence grows. And so some of those situations, maybe like where people would describe social anxiety or any of those situations where a star child kind of feels, oh, I'm not sure about this stuff, they come with practice and it
Hmm.
gets easier. But getting that practice and putting yourself forward can be
That
the
very
hardest thing.
that very first step is the hardest thing, and uh, it's like with any skill, kind of like what you were saying. Because, for instance, I'll use the podcast as an example. Like I had zero experiences being a podcast host before I started the podcast. I had zero confidence in it. Do I have confidence in it now? A little bit, but it's there because I have repetition. I have the experience of having started it in the first place. And with my social anxiety, like my social anxiety is just generalized anxiety. So it just someone could break in my door right now. I've been a little anxious about that all day, just why? Because the door exists. But it's one of those things that if I were to hyperfixate on it, then I would get nothing done.
Yeah.
But the same thing goes with fear. If I let that fear get in the way of starting the podcast, like, oh, I don't want to talk into a microphone, I don't want to let my thoughts be on the internet for people to think and criticize me over, then we would never have this conversation. And it's one of those things that I'm so glad that I did because I have no idea what the next conversation is going to be about sometimes. And even if I have an idea of what it's about, I never know where it's going to go, you know? And that's the great thing about life because we never know where it's going to go.
And it's by getting out there and trying. that it takes you down all different routes. I know that's one of the things I really enjoy about these podcasts. Like you say, you pick a theme or there's a topic to be talked about, but it can go off in so many different directions. And if we picked the same theme 3 times, we'd have 3 completely different conversations, and that's life as well. It's what you make it, but only to a certain extent, because you might choose differently each time. And there's so many choices we can make, and the only thing that's constant is change, isn't it? Like change is constant from the minute that you're born until the minute that you die. Life changes and nothing stays the same. And so the more that you can roll with that change and embrace that flexibility, the better time you'll have, I think. As hard as some of those changes are, because they are sometimes.
Yeah, and you have a very good point about rolling with the punches, rolling with life and stuff, because we never know what is around the corner. And like, I know this is a little bit of a weird one, but it's like, I got some gray hairs in my beard. Like, I never thought I'd have gray hairs in my beard. Like, I'm getting old, and I don't feel that much older, but at the same time, I feel more me. And it's weird, but it's the best kind of weird, because it's like, I wish I felt more me a long time ago, but it's for a whole multitude of reasons that I can't change. But what I can do is I can sit there and, like you said, I know all the stuff that is not me, and so now it makes it a little bit easier to go, okay, this is me.
Yeah, trial and error, isn't it? And also, who we are at a certain age changes as we go through. So who we might be at 20, even if someone's found themselves by 20 and they're pretty confident they know who they are, that is still going to be a different version of that person to who they are when they're 30 or 40 or however old. It's such an evolving process, and I that's one of the things I really look forward to now about getting older, because when I look back, who I was when I was 20 was such a different person to who I was when I was 30 and then when I was 40. And certain things that I was confident with when I was younger, I'm much more confident with now. And some of the things that bother me now would never have bothered me when I was younger. And I'm really excited to see what the next 20 years bring, because I couldn't have ever, if you know, when you're younger and people say to you, what do you want to do when you're older? And you say, I want to do this. And I remember getting married when I was 24. And I remember thinking about what the future held and what we wanted to do. And my life looks completely different now to what I wanted when I was 24. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change any of it, because it's been a real experience. And I'm just excited to see what the next 20 years bring as well. I'm sure there'll be challenges. There always are, but I'm sure there'll be some good stuff too.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the great part about life, and we get to experience this. And whenever we have this kind of realization, the great part is we get to have it again and again and again if we want to. And it's that whole, like, kind of looking back on life and being able to say, yeah, that's where I was. Okay, I'm grateful again for where I'm at now. And just, it's such a cool experience whenever you can actually sit there and be at peace with yourself, you know? And it takes a lot of work to get there. Even if you're at peace with yourself for just like 5 seconds, that can change your whole day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And once you've experienced that peace, you want more of it, don't you? But it is like, it's something that you have to work at continually. Just like if you have a particular skill that takes a lot of precision, it's like that, isn't it? You have to keep constantly working on it, little bits every day or every few days. And the more you do work at it, the longer you get that peace for.
And it is very much like a muscle. I don't exercise it, then it does disappear. And it's really weird because you're like, but I work so hard for it. But I think where the magic of all that really comes down to is being able to have a return for what I put out, and so essentially not reaching burnout. But that can be really difficult to do too. And burnout looks a little bit different for some people, and some people don't recover from it as other people do. And a lot of the times, whenever some people recover from burnout, they will be a totally different person, right?
Yeah.
Or at least in my experience. So, if not a totally different person, at least a modified version of that person before their burnout.
Yeah. And it's exercising that muscle again, isn't it? Because if you've experienced burnout, it's something you never want to experience again. But I have experienced burnout more than once, and each time it's made me a stronger person. Each time it's something I never want to experience again, but each time the warning signs get louder. So, so that tells me to employ my coping strategies sooner. And you get better at recognizing that. But it is something that we do have to work on a lot, and it depends what you've got going on in life and the pace of life. I know, like recently, I've been working really hard on my website. I've been working on a new project, and so I've wanted to put every minute into that so that I can actually see it. But then it's balancing that on top of everything else. So I've had a couple of moments where I've thought, you're tired, you really need to rest. So part of me is really pleased that I've noticed that sooner. But then that's competing with the other part of me that's like, come on, get it finished, you need to get it finished. So, yeah, burnout can be really challenging. And I think you're right, it does change people. It definitely changed me, and it was probably through burnout that I started to release other people's expectations of me and to realise that I was putting extra pressure on myself to live up to those expectations. But it can definitely be something that we need to be more aware of and use as a tool to recognise in ourselves where we're at in terms of our journey towards peace, and how we're listening to our bodies and our soul and our mind. Body, mind and soul, it all goes together, doesn't it?
Yep, it sure does. And it usually goes in a way that or rather, I'll focus on one or two, and then I'll let the other one or two fall behind. And then it's like, oh crap, I gotta run and catch that back up. And then it's like, oh crap, forgot that one. I've left another piece back there, hang on. And it can just be a whole back and forth. But whenever I get a little bit of all of it together, it's nice.
Yeah, I feel like I spend a lot of time running back for, and yeah, those moments where you get them all together, they're rare, aren't they? But yeah, they do feel nice.
Yeah, they feel nice. They are rare, but it always seems that whenever I get it going, something comes along to shake it all up again, like a giant snow globe.
Oh God, it's not just me.
Nope, it's not. It's totally not. It's every time everything is like, all right, everything's settled down. Things are going the way I planned them. Everything is in snow globe. And it's like, no, never mind. All right, starting from square three. At least it's not one.
Yes, yeah. I think we get better at dealing with the snow globe, but it still comes from left field, doesn't it? It's always something you wouldn't have predicted.
No. And I mean, but that's the whole thing with life. And like you said before, it's a whole bunch of trial and error. It's about building our discernment for experiences, situations, and people, and just how to find myself, apply myself, and just be the best use for everyone else, you know? So, real quick, we have reached the end of this episode. This episode just flew by.
It really did.
Yeah. Before we get to the actual like ending, is there anything that you wanted to speak about on this particular episode before we get to the closing?
No, I think maybe just to say, like in summary, I guess thinking about our self-understanding. Self-understanding requires so much work and it can be hard. But if you stick at it, it's so worth it. And if we can start that with star children at such a younger age, then they can be further on their journey with that self-understanding, and hopefully life will actually feel easier for them. But there's maybe a bit of work to do around parents understanding those traits in their children as well. And we talked about control. Maybe it's letting go of that control and accepting that who we were as children growing up is not who the children of today are growing up. And the world has changed, everything's changed. And just releasing that control and letting them flourish, I think.
Yeah, I think that that is a great message, and it really is probably the key element of this episode is just relinquishing control of your children of sorts, but maybe not like of your children. Like, don't let them off into the streets and start causing anarchy or anything like that.
No.
But it's essentially saying that they don't have to fit your idea of what they should be like, essentially. Just
Yeah.
they are going to find themselves, and it's going to be okay in some sense. And we actually got a chat message that says, "Just wait, LOL." And I don't know about what part. Like, do they want us to keep going? Because I have to edit it for the radio, and keeping it in an hour can be difficult if we're going over. But before we call this episode good, do we want to make a part 4? And what would we want to talk about?
Ooh,
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff out of this one.
there is, yeah. There is a lot of stuff. We might need to have a think about that.
Yeah, we might have to. But I'm good with a part 4 if you're good for a
Yeah,
part
good
4.
with part 4.
Okay, sweet. So with that, real quick, why don't you remind everyone your website, where they can find you and reach you if they want some of your vitality coaching?
It's www.yourvitalitycoaching.com.
Awesome.
And there's loads of stuff on there and it's all up to date.
Oh,
Because I've just been working on it.
there you go. And you can tell us a little bit more about your upcoming projects and stuff that you're working on.
Oh yeah,
Next episode?
by the next episode, hopefully it'll be live.
Yeah, sweet. Well, Zoe, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure having you back on the show today, and I can't wait for our next episode. And I just wish you nothing but the best until the next time.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. And to everyone out there, thank you for listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. And as always, have a great day. Don't be a mean person. You can be a little aggressive if you have to, but don't be mean. There's a difference. And just try to be nice. It's okay. Relinquish a little bit of control and just have a good day. So, as always, much love. See you next time.